Today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 watches released in 2023, so let's get right into it. Starting with what I feel is one of the absolute best releases from Rolex in a very, very long time is the release of the new Rolex Yacht-Master, the reference 226627. Now this was an all titanium release, which I'm all for. I love the fact that Rolex is now experimenting with materials. We saw this first with the Deep Sea Challenge, but I think they really paid tribute to the original prototype made for Sir Ben Ainslie in a really faithful and really well done way. I think this is a knockout watch and knockout release, and the numbers certainly prove it. You'll find these on the secondary market still trading over $40,000, which is crazy considering there's a watch that has an MSRP of about $14,000. Now I think that there's 2 drawbacks to this watch. The first being the 42 millimeter size. I don't like the fact that it's 42 millimeters. I think it would have been better in 40 millimeters, but that's just a personal preference because I do wear a GMT Master 2 on a daily basis, and I think 40 millimeters is just perfect. The second thing I would say is also the bracelet. So it has the Easy Link extension rather than the full glide lock like on a Submariner. Again, very much a nitpick, but I feel overall this is a phenomenal release, one that I actually probably want to add to my personal collection, and without a doubt going to be a future collectible, and already is, I think, very, very collectible amongst the Rolex range. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit and move on to my second pick, which is actually another Rolex watch. I'm going to count these both in the same kind of first pick, if you will, just because I'm not going to go much into detail in this one. It's the Rolex Le Mans Daytona. I think this is an absolutely incredible looking watch. I love the faithful re-edition to kind of Daytonas of old. I like the fact, again, that Rolex is doing something that is a little out of the box for them specifically, in the sense that, you know, it's a bit of an unexpected release, them paying tribute to kind of historical Daytonas. But I'm all for it. I really, really love this watch. Love the open case back. MSRP $45,000, but, you know, it's just not a watch you're probably going to get your hands on. And if you do, you're going to have to go on the secondary market, and we're talking about a watch that's going to be upwards of $200,000 in the current market. So yeah, I think 2 great releases from Rolex, and I absolutely love them. Again, I'm going to take the Yacht-Master just because I think it's more up my alley, just in terms of a release. It's something a little bit more bold and daring from Rolex, but I love the Le Mans Daytona. I thought it was absolutely amazing. Now, moving on to my second pick, my official second pick, is one that I think really was a bit of a quiet release and didn't garner the attention I felt it deserved. And it was actually a split-second chronograph made by an independent watch brand called Petermann Bédat. Now, these 2 watchmakers actually joined forces, originally having met, I believe, from their time at Longa, working for A. Long & Zone. I think that they created a chronograph that is really the first to rival the datograph in terms of movement, architecture, and finishing and overall look. I think it's one of, if not the best manual wind chronographs on the market, and I don't say those words lightly, especially because I hold the datograph in such high regard. I still think to this day it's probably the standard bearer of what an in-house manual wind chronograph movement should be and should look like, and I think this definitely rivals it, especially due to the fact that it's a monopusher and it's a split-second chronograph. Now this was one that they did in a limited edition of 10 pieces, and the retail was actually $270,000, even sold out before the release. Now I will say this is a trend with independent watch brands that is a bit frustrating, in the sense that they're becoming increasingly difficult to get just due to availability, right? So many people want it, and a lot of these independent watch brands, to create hype and to keep the hype for their brand alive, are doing these very, very limited production run watches, but they're also doing it at a price that I feel is extremely high. At the end of the day, this is a time-only split-second chronograph, and again, I appreciate the difficulty that goes into making a watch like that, but at $270,000, it's not a watch that any mere mortal could really get their hands on, and I think that's a shame, just because the quality of independent watchmakers are so good, and I think it's something that more people need to experience, but it's a bit of a drawback and a bit difficult to get into this market, especially at these price points. Again, that doesn't take away from the incredible quality of this watch. This is a split-second monopusher chronograph with an awesome semi-skeletonized dial. I love the look of it. I think it's absolutely an outrageously well-done movement and well-finished movement. I think this is going to be, no doubt about it, a definite future collectible, and one that is going to be remembered as one of the most, I think, kind of influential and potentially groundbreaking chronographs of its time. So really well done by Petermann Bédat, and this definitely makes my top 5 list of watches released in 2023. Moving on to my third pick is actually something from Patek Philippe. Now, for those who know me know that Patek Philippe is not necessarily my favorite brand in the entire world. I think that a lot of the releases they make are kind of, God, how can I put it? Maybe a little bit conservative, too conservative even for my liking. And I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily somebody who likes to go out on the limb and be bold necessarily. But they released this year the 5316/50P. This is kind of that smoke dial tourbillon perpetual calendar that's actually a retrograde perpetual with also a minute repeater. I think they absolutely hit it out of the park with this watch. It's one of the nicest watches I think Patek Philippe has released in recent years and in recent memory, especially in a grand complication. When it comes to grand complication, a lot of times Patek Philippe can be very, very conservative in their aesthetics. So for them to do a smoked kind of skeletonized dial, I think that is awesome, especially considering the success of probably, I would say, one of their biggest competitors, A-Long and Zone, with the Lumen series. Again, I think this look is just awesome. It showcases classical watchmaking with a modern twist and a modern touch that I'm all for from Patek Philippe. The size is great, the proportions are great, the look is phenomenal, and there's no doubt about it, this is going to be a very, very popular seller. I think overall, just based on its aesthetic, it's going to definitely be a popular seller, and there's no doubt about it. I think this is going to help raise the line for the grand complications of Patek Philippe, the real grand complications, combining a lot of these kind of upper echelon complications, and it's gonna cause them and potentially make Patek Philippe shift towards a little bit more bold and daring design, which I'm all for. Moving on to my fourth pick is another independent watchmaker. This time it's Simon Brette, which I think made one of the most beautiful looking watches I know in recent memory for especially a time-only watch. Now I really commend Simon Brette for this release because he went above and beyond to credit all the artisans who ended up working on this watch. For those who don't know, Simon Brette is a young independent watchmaker. This is actually his first watch released, and he really made his bones, I would say, working for MB&F, but worked for a number of different brands. And he's mostly an engineer by kind of trade, if you will, but makes, in this case, a really, really phenomenal watch, combining the artisanship of a few different makers and created what I feel is really going to be another collectible watch in the independent watch space, and one that I feel he can really build his brand on. Again, I didn't like the fact that it was so limited, this time only making 12 pieces overall, but what I did like is the price point. Now this is a zirconium watch, so you're not paying that precious metal premium, and this actually retailed for $50,000. I think that's fairly reasonable considering the incredible craftsmanship and all the artisanal qualities that went into this watch. Not to mention the finishing of this is just absolutely incredible. This is what I would say is independent watchmaking at its best, making a simple time-only watch, but really raising the bar of what can be done and what has been done. And I certainly believe he achieved this in this design. Love the size at 39 millimeters. Love the price point at $50,000. I think that's fairly reasonable. And again, it goes back to this idea of gatekeeping, right? It's not a gatekeeping price point. Although it is still a lot of money, no doubt about it, for a watch in this category, I think it's fairly reasonable, especially considering all the work that got put in to make this watch. Now for my last pick of my favorite watches released in 2023, I had to go out with a bang, and this certainly made an impression that I think is going to last the test of time. And the watch that I picked is actually the Audemars Piguet Code 1159 Ultra Complication. This is a watch that combines a number of different complications, and there's no doubt about it that it's a groundbreaking watch just due to the fact that it's the first ever perpetual calendar that you can operate with a crown and go forwards and backwards without harming the actual mechanism. Now this was made actually by Renaud and Papy, the workshop that is, I would say, famous, at least made famous by us because we talk about them so much. But yeah, there's no doubt about it, innovation packed, and not to mention combining all of these complication in what I feel is actually a killer design, especially that all skeletonized dial is really incredible. One thing that I would say has really been lacking from AP, I would say in recent years, the last decade or so, is the finishing of their movements in particular. When it comes to kind of the upper echelon brands, I always said that Vacheron Constantin were the best because these were really the only watches that were artisanally made at all levels, be it the entry level or their highest level complications. That can't also be said, or that couldn't have also been said by AP and by Patek Philippe, right? These would typically reserve, especially for the grand complications, when it came to kind of the highest level finishing, where the entry level models kind of suffered and weren't as good of quality. Again, that's just just my personal opinion, but the results do prove it in a lot of these watches when you do handle them in person. And when it came to this in particular, I think AP really went above and beyond, especially when it comes to the interior and exterior angles that are beveled on the bridges of this actual movement. I think it's an absolute knockout design. It's finished to the nines. It combines so many different complications. The innovation with the perpetual calendar, again, can be understated just how difficult that is to accomplish. So no doubt about it, it's an amazing watch. And again, probably something we'll never be able to get our hands on just because the retail is $1.8 million. I doubt AP is going to make very, very many of these. But again, just due to how special this watch is, I had to mention it in my top 5 watches released in 2023. So guys, that concludes my list for top 5 watches released in 2023, or should I say top 6, because I did include that Le Mans Daytona. But guys, let me know down in the comments what you feel are the 5 best watches released this year. I think there were a lot of great releases, so definitely a lot didn't make the list that are fair, and I would love to hear your criticism of my list. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and of course, I'll see you in the next one.